This is Jeffrey Reddick, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Yeah, man. I was even just talking off mic. Jeffrey's back on the show talking about his latest movie. And it's interesting. When we first met, we met at Hilliard's place in the lot, and we talked about, just what you did and all of your adventure to get up to New Line. And it's really remarkable the time that you came up. You captured a moment where, like, you could really call information, right, and go,
Yeah,
give me the phone number for New Line, as like a high school kid or whatever, precocious. And then I love your story about writing that letter where you're like, I took the time to write this thing. You damn well better read it, mister. And the guy's like,
yeah.
hey, sorry.
It was a little less aggressive, but it was like, yeah, I've spent $3 on your movie, so I think you can take 5 minutes to read my story. But
And he did. He did. I'll be damned.
And that was also a different time because that was, New Line, Nightmare on Elm Street was their first big hit. So, right. They were, that was a moment in time too where, Bob probably had time to read some kid from Kentucky's, story. So yeah, it was it's been a very interesting career trajectory for sure. And a lot of that was, obviously from stuff that I put out, as far as like effort, but also the luck of the timing of it when, again, you could just email something that have a studio and they would read it.
Yeah. How much of what you do is that? I mean, like, so that, that black kid who lives in Kentucky, who's like, tells his mom, hey, I'm going to be in the theater arts, or I'm going to write TV shows. That's still an impossible sell for some kid out there. Like, you're just try to get out of Kentucky. Let's not try to, conquer Hollywood or nothing. What does that look like today?
It was funny. I've always, my dream growing up was to be an actor because I just love movies so much. And, mom would just be like, that's cute. Just get, major in something with it and focus on something you can actually get paid for and get a real job in. Cause, nobody, and this is a thing that I hear people, especially if they live in kind of rural areas across America, they all have the same stories from their families where it's like, you can never succeed in that business. So, okay, my cat is like going crazy in the window here. So pardon the flashing lights. But yeah, like it's something like your family, families just in general, I think it's probably because we don't teach arts, as much as we used to in schools. And like, if a program's going to get cut, it's certainly the arts program because it's not seen as like a viable work to get into, but it's actually a lot of it's a hell of a lot of work to get into. And you do spend more time obviously struggling to make a steady income than you do in a set job where there's a track to start off here and then you keep advancing. But it's definitely worth it if that's kind of like the only goal that you have in life, or your only dream is to like be a writer or actor or singer or director or something that's, painter,
We can't go too much further without mentioning that you created the Final Destination franchise, which has given you, from my point of view, it's given you a lot of ability to do things in Hollywood that would be abnormal in terms of, a writer coming up, to be at this for, gosh, what is it, 20 years professionally now that you've been doing this?
Yeah, let's say 20.
Okay, well, 15 or 10
been long.
or 5.
It's been longer.
It's been a long time.
It's been longer, yeah.
Okay, longer. Well, because you started as a kid, right? Yeah, I guess so. It is longer. But that franchise tag, has that been helpful, or is it something where you're like, I don't want to be known as that guy?
No, you know what? It certainly has been helpful. And I'm a big horror fan, a very proud horror fan. So I don't mind that tag at all. I definitely want to create other things, and hopefully, it's certainly a drag, and it's a high bar for somebody for their first film. So you're definitely chasing that, you're definitely chasing that, that dragon, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, the rest of your career. My thing that I did, I worked in New York, and since I kind of grew up inside the studio, when I sold the first one, I was like, oh, I can just stay here in New York and work and write on, and just keep doing this. And then when I sold my story for the second Final Destination, they were like, you need to go out, we love you, but it's time to go out and be a big boy like writer. But I stay in New York. Like when I sold the project in 97, career advisories would tell you, like our advisors would say, go out to Los Angeles and start work in the town, because that's the peak time to do it. And I stayed in New York, worked at New Line Cinema, and didn't really come out to LA, and only came out to LA after 9/11. So it was, 4 or 5 years after I sold the project and it was announced that I actually came out to Hollywood to work the town. And by the time I got out here, they're like, who the hell are you? And I'm like, my name's all over the poster for Final Destination. The director and his co-writer had lived out in LA. And so when you're out here, it's like they put a face to the people that they see. So it was kind of a re-education, but it's definitely helped. It's definitely helped. It's just when people say, bring us something else like Final Destination, and then they'll say, well, this one's too much like Final Destination. And it's like Goldilocks's porridge. It's like, this one isn't like Final Destination enough. And what they mean is they want that idea that is a different spin on something that's been done, like there are no original ideas, but the execution of that was original. And that's all like kudos to, New Line for taking a chance on it. Cause they were like, we don't like this not showing death and not having, a villain that you can see. Like that's not how horror works. And also kudos to James Wong and Glenn Morgan when they came on for fighting to make sure that it stayed that way. Because it was a risk, and studios don't take risks anymore. So it's like, well, if I brought you Final Destination today, you would pass on it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, bring us something. And you're like, how about this something different? Not a horror film. Whoa. And they're like, no, not that something. Bring us something else. You're totally right. Well, so it's all comic book movies. It's all sequels. Why has Hollywood become so, I don't know. I hate to put this in a negative term, so I'm just going to fail and do it. Why are they so locked in on something that's, I remember when I used to want to see a sequel, right? Like as a kid, like, man, here comes Superman 2. I was stoked for it, right?
Yeah.
But now I'm like, oh God, can't we just get a different story? What happened?
It's pretty, and I saw it happen when I worked at New Line. It's a pretty basic thing. I mean, it's show business. And when I worked at New Line, like, Bob Shea is a movie lover. Like he loves movies and the creative side of it. Mike DeLuca who was, working at New Line at the time, was a movie lover. And now you see a lot of business people have taken over the studios because they want to, and so their decision process is all about risk mitigation. So for them, it's more, when they do a sequel or a remake or do a movie based off a big book property, in their minds, it's like, well, there's an audience out there for it. So if we just redo it or if we adapt this book series, then honestly, their thinking is like, if it fails, it's not going to land on me, because I'll be like, well, that was there were 10 million people that read that book, it's not, my fault that they didn't come see the movie.
Right. Yeah.
And when you do see original stuff coming out of studios now, it's like, Chris Nolan has to do like, 2 or 3 Batman movies before he could do Inception and then do Tenet. It's like he had to continually prove himself at the safe blockbusters before the studio would give him the money to do something original. So the very good news is there's so many more outlets and production companies out there that you don't have to worry about trying to get directly to a studio. It's almost honestly, it's almost impossible to get to a studio. Like most of the work now is, you try to either get to a production company that puts out their own stuff or has a distribution deal, at a studio, or you get with companies who have a first look deal at a studio, instead of trying to go right to the studios. Cause it's like, it's just hard. It's even hard to get like a new Final Destination going. I mean, I'm very proud that we've had 5 sequels, but if you look at the horror landscape, like I think we're probably one of the only hit franchises that's only had 4 sequels actually. I think we're like 5, Final Destination 5. Yeah. I am bad at math. It's a COVID brain, but
It's early.
but like Friday the 13th and Halloween and all the other big horror franchises have had like 15 sequels and reboots and reimaginings and prequels, and yeah, it's pretty funny.
You don't have to answer this, so definitely feel free to bow out. But does the access to the franchise create a lot of financial freedom where you can pick and choose what you want to do, or are you having to I constantly have to do the same kind of things as Chris Nolan? Like I've got to go do these things to earn the right to do what I want to do 1 in 4, 1 in 5 times.
Oh no, I mean, yeah, no, I definitely. I mean, I wish I was Chris Nolan. No, but I definitely have to continue, because again, people obviously have this assumption that, Final Destination's made like, over $1 billion, I think, in box office and ancillary markets. And so they automatically think like, I got a huge chunk of that. And that's not how Hollywood works, unfortunately. So people always talk about Final Destination and about how, yeah, in our rooms, we're always saying like, we want something like Final Destination. So it's great to meet with you and hear your ideas. And then you tell them the ideas. And again, like I said, they still want the same safe stuff. Like they're not willing to take a chance on something that's original, which even New Line, like we had to threaten, the producers had to threaten to take it to Miramax, like New Line's competitor. They were like, if you pass on this, because they didn't officially keep passing on it, they kept saying, well, we still have so they kept equivocating like why they weren't ready to pull the trigger. And the producer's like, well, if you pass on it again, we're going to go to Miramax. And then New Line's like, we'll buy it. So,
yeah.
It's that thing where, again, they say they want something original, but they're scared of it because, again, there are jobs on the line. Like if an executive greenlights something that's original and risky and then it fails, they're going to get the blame. And so business people don't like to, they like to cover their assets.
Yeah, and it does seem like, and this is, again, not a knock on the big studios, but their game is to make those big blockbuster movies that bring in 10x return on a massive budget.
Yeah.
And, they get that right once or twice, in a year or two, and everybody's happy and they're making money. So they really aren't they're not interested in these other risks because they are already, they're already doing something risky with putting all this money out. So I get that. And there's plenty of places that are in between that do these kinds of things. Is there a specific number of production houses that kind of focus on thrillers and horror as a genre?
You know what I mean? Obviously Blumhouse is the big one, but I know Sony has, they've had a good track record in focusing on horror. And I know most of the studios are looking to get into it now more seriously because, it's making a lot of money. So a lot of this, a lot of the studios are looking. Platinum Dunes was a production company, obviously, that did a lot of the, the remakes of like, Nightmare on Elm Street and Texas Chainsaw and Friday the 13th. So there are companies that are doing that, but I think pretty much any production company is looking for a good horror movie. It's just, now we're dealing with COVID, which makes, filming hard and has pushed a lot of productions, and it also, a lot of people are suffering. Like, so the human suffering is obviously more important than making a movie, but, it's, but there's the people that are working too are not able to work right now because, there's such restrictive measures, especially in Los Angeles, to make films, because there's just so many safety protocols and, it takes a lot of time. So I think that'll change, but even, I mean, the movie blockbusters don't, if they, like Deadpool, I forget what the budget on Deadpool was, but I think it was like 50 million or something, which is way cheaper than 120 million or 200 million that they spend on most of these. And it made a ton of money. Like, it just goes to show you, like, if you spend your money wisely, you can make a really good movie that makes a lot of money. But a lot of these superhero movies, especially, are comic book adaptations. They have to get the rights, and then, they pay everybody top dollar, like they get all the top everybody's working on it. And there's a lot of mid-level people that are just as good as the top level people. But if you're taking a risk on a movie, like, why not hire the best to help cover your butt, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things you said, and I don't know if you remember, we talked about this. I grew up with another horror writer and director, Todd Nunes, and he said the same thing. It's just horror movies make money, though. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not going for a 5-star hit. You're going for, and I'm not trying to undermine what you guys do, but
Of course.
I want 2.5 stars. And I know this movie, like, it will draw our fan out. They don't want these elegant, 5-star productions. Sure, you'd like to have a great movie, but there's a sweet spot for this genre, it seems like, and it is profitable. Is it just that it's not profitable enough? Like, they're like, yeah, we're going to make money, but we'd like to make a lot more. Or
No,
what is it?
I mean, the movies that are hits make a lot of money. Like Happy Death Day made over 100 million, I think.
Yeah.
Insidious, like, all those, The Conjurings, Get Out, like all these horror movies, make a shit ton of money, especially when you compare it to what their production costs were. So
Yeah.
they make money. It's just there's still this thing in Hollywood where it's like horror is just not as respected as other genres. Like, I would say The Invisible Man was one of the best films to come out last year, or this year. Years are blending together, and I think that one actually could get some like Academy recognition, because Elizabeth, the performances were great, the directing was great, but the genre itself has just always been seen as like, there's porn and then there's horror, as far as respectability in the business goes. And it's been frustrating as a fan growing up in the business, where it's like the studios gladly make them and they talk about how they make money, we don't need stars, we just need a good story. But then, when it comes to kind of rewarding great horror films, like, they don't do it. There's just a bar for horror that's set incredibly high. And even the ones that surpass the bar and are horror films that are better than dramas or comedies will just get overlooked.
And from talking to Mark Pellington, who directs, he's like, I can't even get a thriller made at all. And I would love to hear your thoughts on the line between thriller and horror, like when they, because a lot of times they blend. I think a lot of your stuff is kind of thriller-esque, but also has the horror element to it. But he's like, you can't make a thriller movie unless you pay for it yourself on Hollywood, and no one's doing that. What are your thoughts? Like, why does a whole genre like thriller go away? And then what is the distinction between the two?
I mean, I have a very wide umbrella for horror, so I consider like a really good thriller to be a horror movie as well. Any movie that like makes you scared and nervous and tense, Get Out was more of a thriller than but I consider it a horror movie. But I'm sure, if movie critics were breaking it down, they would probably call it a thriller.
Right.
But to Mark's point, probably the thing is now, what I've seen happen, which has changed so much over the years, which is, again, totally ridiculous in my mind, is, we'll take a script to a studio and they're like, we love your script. What stars do you have attached? And I'm like, hey guys, when I used to work at New Line Cinema, I know it's been a while, but they would buy a script and then they would attach stars. Like, that's your job. Like, they almost want you to bring them a director, a star, and a script. But then a star's not going to sign on to a script unless they know there's a studio that's backing it and going to put it out. So, it's kind of, it's like Hollywood's just made it even, the studio system has made it even harder to get in, because they want you to do all the work now.
Which makes me wonder, like, in the podcast world, we're related. We're, I don't know, maybe first cousin, second cousin, something like that. But you have to get to a certain point before they will take a shot at someone who doesn't need a shot anymore because they've reached a certain point. Like, if I had 1 million people watching the show, I wouldn't have to get a meeting with Wondery. They would just come to me, but I wouldn't need them anymore. Like, I don't need to share my audience with you.
I know. Absolutely. And that's the point, is like, when I'm talking to certain people, it's like, well, if I have a star, then I don't need you. Like I can just go to investors and get this finance. Like, you know, like Mark said, we can just finance it ourselves. If you're going to make us go out and get a star, like, yeah, like why do we don't need you anymore then? So it's the business is kind of sorting itself out now. I think because of the pandemic and because traditional, you know, a lot of traditional theatrical films have gone to VOD and probably made more money on VOD because they haven't had to spend all the
Sure.
distribution costs. I think that's going to make the business kind of reassess. I know they were already reassessing films.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we won't get our Avengers and our Wonder Womans and our big, you know, action movies, because again, people are always going to want to see those. But kind of these really bloated budgets for things that don't need to be bloated, I think we're going to see a lot more people being fiscally responsible and also taking chances on more stuff, because that's the stuff that's going to stand out when people are sitting at home going through their Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to be positive about the industry, I think we can say a couple things. One, the stigma, if there was anything left to it with, you know, straight to video or video on demand, that's all gone, because there are no major theatrical releases right now. It's just not viable. And who would have thought that was the case a year ago? We're like, yeah, no one's even going to go to theaters for the next year. Like, that's impossible. That's not possible. What's Orville Redenbacher going to do when he has to sell his popcorn? You know? Like, but here we are, you know, and you're like, Hulu, the Obamas, everybody's got a streaming platform they're putting together. Heck, President Trump right now, assuming he has to get a new job in about 6 months, he's considering starting a media outlet, not with the traditional studio, but doing all of this stuff. So it's gotten so small that like the market has kind of exploded, and everybody's got their individual power. And you know, it's like we're redoing a United Artists studio where like everybody can go out and create something. You get on a small budget, and who wants a giant? You can't have a giant crew right now. It's impossible to pull off. I mean, it would be so expensive to make something that was COVID safe, and then even then, I mean, just the protocol to manage the protocol to get a movie like that made, it's just impossible. So it is a good time in terms of the opportunities are wide open. It seems like. Yeah.
And I think what people are realizing now is there is a, you know, because there's so many, you know, billions of people on the planet, that there's, you know, there's a way to reach these people now without having to go the theatrical route. It's like you can tap into your market with your, you know, private channels. You know, something will become a viral YouTube hit and get made into a movie, or something will, you know, a short will like become a sensation online and get made into a feature. So there's a lot more opportunities for people to create their own content and get it out there, which is great. And you're absolutely right. You have A-list stars now that are doing, you know, HBO series or AMC series or TNT series. So this whole idea that doing TV is like a step down from having a theatrical release or having a straight to video release is like gone now, because you have major stars doing it. It's just a funny business. It just cracks me up how I love how it works, but from a business perspective, it's always frustrating when it's like, you feel like, you know, the studio system's like 10 years behind the rest of the country, even though they're trying to be so forward thinking. It's like, you know, there's no shame in doing a cable movie or a TV movie if it's a great movie, you know. You know, there is something obviously like, you know, there's an inherent kind of ego boost if your movie comes out in theaters and you can go see it with a crowd. And that's why I think the theater experience is never going to die. I know people are kind of, you know, planning its funeral, like drive-ins are going to go, our theaters are going to go away. They're never going to go away. Like we always, you know, we're communal social people, and, you know, we love to go sit in a theater and scream or laugh and cry with a bunch of people. Like, it's just, there's nothing, that feeling's amazing. So it may take a while to get back to that place, but we will be at that place again.
I took my nieces, two nieces and my daughter, and they were all, you know, like middle school, early high school age. And I took them to go see the Purge. And we saw it in a black theater, and they had never experienced this before, you know. And it's like, no, this is interactive theater here, but this is not just shut up and watch a movie. Like, and it was great because I'm like, this is so much fun. Like, you know, it's it was just wonderful. And they had never experienced that. Once they had seen it, I'm like, you have to understand, like, if you go to this part of town and you watch this kind of a movie, this is what you're like. This is the experience. You're getting free entertainment. You just have to go along for the ride and then go see the movie later on. But you're right. Like, it's so much fun to go see a thriller, especially where the whole crowd is reacting and we all feed on each other.
Yeah.
You know, it's fantastic. I love that. Oh, hang on, I pushed the wrong button. I wanted let's talk about your movie though. I mean, we've been chatting about the industry. Let's get specifically into what you're working on now. Now you've got several projects in the pipe, but let's start with Don't Look Back, because I was watching the trailer and I watched a good bit of it on Vimeo from you. Thanks for the trailer or the access, by the way.
Of course.
You know, classic. You know, I would call it a ghost story. What do you call it?
It's I would call it, because we're not sure. It becomes I would call it a mystery thriller with some horror supernatural elements, because you don't the kind of mystery of the movie is, you know, it's about a group of people who see somebody getting assaulted in a park and for various reasons don't help, like don't even call the police until it's too late. And the person dies and the witnesses who were there get outed to the public, and then something or somebody starts coming after them. So the lead character is kind of trying to solve the mystery of the murder in the park, but she's seeing things that, you know, she's kind of a spiritual woman. And so she's seeing things that lead her to believe that his ghost maybe is haunting them, but you're not sure if it's his ghost. You're not sure if it's karma. You're not sure if there's a killer out there and she's just imagining this. So that's the kind of that's the driving force of the movie. So it is funny because as much as I love horror, like I did pick I picked the type of movie that they tell you not to pick when you're first directing something, which is, you know, it's basically a mystery thriller and potential supernatural horror movie. And you don't know what it is until everything comes together at the end. So I'm very happy with how it turned out. I think, you know, the people that it's been funny watching the critic reactions, because the critics that haven't liked it have gone in expecting Final Destination. So they're like, well, Jeffrey should know that for a good horror movie, you need to have big bloody set pieces with, like, you know, this and this and this. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't Final Destination. Like, there's a reason I can't show like big bloody set pieces, because we don't know who or what the killer is. Right. So it's a mystery until the end. And the people that have actually really it's definitely like, which is great. You know, I think people have a strong reaction one way or the other. There are people that really don't like it because they just don't think it's horror enough in the traditional horror sense. And the people that do like it really like it because they get all the other kind of stuff that I was trying to say with this about, you know, just how society, you know, we've become an age where, like, if we see something horrible happen, we pull out our phones and we record it. Like back in the old days, it's like dial 911. You know, and then you can record it if you want, but people skip over the 911 part and just go right to recording. And I think that speaks to like a real problem that we have in society right now with apathy and you know, and also with this film, you know, faith is a strong element of it. Like the lead character is, you know, without, you know, pounding it over the head, she's a Christian woman of faith, which is interestingly has rubbed some horror reviewers the wrong way. And you know, but the movie deals with guilt and faith and, you know, karma and you know, apathy, and, you know, it deals with a lot. I crammed a lot into a short movie, but I wanted to, you know, deal with those kind of themes in my first film for my first time directing.
Yeah, I saw that you were directing. I didn't realize it was directorial debut for you. Congratulations. I just assumed you had already directed. I mean, you've done so many things.
No, so, I directed a short, and I directed a friend's music video, but this is my first time directing a feature. So it was really exciting, and you learn a lot. You know, you get if you've been on, because I've been very fortunate to be on most of the sets of the films that I've done, and you know, you watch other directors and you're on set and you do a short and you're like, oh, I know how this is going to play. But until you're actually directing a feature, you don't realize all the stuff you don't know until you're actually on set. So I learned so much that now I'm very ready to kind of do my next one, you know, when it comes along.
I had a couple of very young filmmakers. They've made a feature film, which already, as you know, is impossible to do.
Yeah.
But they are just so young, and film school and all that. Like the director kept saying, and this is not in any way a knock. I'm just trying to draw a parallel. He kept saying, I learned this in film school. I learned this in film school. And I kept stop saying that. Just say, I know this, master it and everything. But yet they pulled off this movie. And I mean, look, you can get in there with the critics comb and complain about it, but I look at it as being, you've created a piece of art no matter what. This is a movie. It's viable. It got bought by Indican. So they did it. But they're so young. How do you compare your journey to get to this point and direct? Because you're right, like your first time, you can see it and do it, but until you put your hands on it, you don't know it. But is there, how does someone so young and precocious do this and someone so seasoned do it differently? And I don't know.
I always tell people, because I speak to a lot of classes and a lot of students, and I always tell them, like, the passion and the fearlessness that you have now, it'll start going away as you get older. And a lot of it's because this business will chip away at you and break you down. It just will. It's a tough business once you get into the business part of it. But when you're young, like when I was growing up, we didn't have access to like 4K cameras on our iPhones.
Right.
We had to bring out, get out the old clunky, we were happy when you could record it, when we got the cameras where you could record on VHS,
Yeah.
Like, so, young people today have access to so much. And I remember I was judging the horror competition for, and I'm blanking on the school here, but it was a high school here in Los Angeles. And I went there, and like several of the students couldn't be there because they were in Cannes, which cracked me up. Wow. And I remember the winners of the competition, and I have their names somewhere, but they won the film competition for a film that they did. But the best film that I saw was still from them, and it won the audience award. And it was the film because they had finished shooting their movie on like Saturday, and they're like, well, we still have our equipment till Monday, so we might as well just do something else. And so they just came up with an idea. Wow. Hired some neighbors and shot it, and it was the best film of the competition. And it was because they had that passion and that, like, let's just get something done. And that's how you, especially when you're younger, that's the energy that you have, is like, let's just do this and let's just make this.
Yeah.
And they have the resources to do it now. So, my advice is always like, I talked to Craig Perry at USC USC here. And, he asked the class, he's like, okay, how many of you directors, raise your hand, and the directors raise their hand, and writers raise your hand. And then he said, now, how many of you all are friends? And none of them were friends. All the directors were friends with other directors. All the writers were friends with other writers. And he's like, that's the problem. Like, you're a director, you need scripts. You should be making friends with the writers. Actors, you should be making friends with the writers and directors. You know what I mean? Like, so it sounds like these filmmakers, that you're talking about, like, they found a group of people. And that's what I tell people, find like a posse that's diverse, that, has actors, writers, directors in it. Make sure you kind of cut the toxic people out. Cause a lot of this, a lot of any industry, people who succeed can often be like people who talk a big game, but don't deliver anything. So it's like, find a good posse that's like, down to earth, creative, passionate, honest, and surround yourself with those people and make stuff. Like, you don't need to, because if you make something, it will get picked up by somebody. It will draw an audience.
Yeah. I saw, I think it's called Get Duked. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
And it's great. And one of the things I like about it, and this kind of goes to your whole, like, we all have access to wonderful production tools. You don't have to have, I'm going to say this carefully here, you don't have to have special effects. Like, they don't have to be perfect and real. You can have a digital, just straight up effect, nothing terribly special about it, because we've all learned to kind of suspend that part of belief. Like, yeah, we know this is not a multi-$100 million budget movie. Yeah. The fire is going to look a little digitalized, or the car, like, we've gotten to this point. And now imagine 10 years from now, how good these regular effects will be. They really might be truly special grade, where you're like, oh my God, high school kids be, like, think about Blair Witch, whatever that movie's going to be 15 years from now, and what they'll be able to pull off just in post on their own for, a couple $100 in software.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and that's, I'm friends with Dan Myrick, and Eduardo, who did Blair Witch. And it's like, again, that was, they were young, brassy film students who came up with this great idea. And then they found a distributor who came up with a brilliant marketing campaign, and the rest is history with them. It's like, but that's the thing is like, I still get really passionate about stuff, but I can't help but think business outcomes. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think the last script that I wrote just for fun was Tamra. And that was because I got so sick of everybody telling me to like come up with another Final Destination. I'm like, fuck it. I'm going to write a fun movie that has everything in it that I want. And then I wrote Tamra. And it did get watered down. Like originally, it was going to be set up at Lionsgate for like $5 million. And we ended up doing it for way, way less and shooting it in Winnipeg for way, way less money. So there's a lot of stuff that got cut out of it, but it's still one of my favorite movies because I wrote it for fun, and I had a great time writing, and I still have fun writing, but there's always this pressure when you're writing, especially, as you get older and you're working in the business, it's like, okay, I want to write something, but I want to write it to sell. Like I need to sell this. So how do I, merge the creative with the commerce of the business? And when you're younger, you're just like, I have a great story I want to tell. Like that's the 14-year-old kid that wrote Bob Shea. Like I put my heart and soul in this story, and I want you to read it.
Damn it. This is I'm curious too, because I'm going to go back to the movie now. Like they talk about, if you see something, say something, and now it's, if you see something, try to go viral with that shit.
That's what. Yeah, and
Have we lost control or lost the sense for what a hero in real life really is? Have we just forgotten that? Like you don't have to have a fire coat or a badge on to be a hero. You can really be someone's mom or dad and, go and, do something about something. And I'm not saying making a vigilante out of a mom.
No. And I've said the same thing. It's like, that's kind of the undercurrent of the problem now is people are more, it's not everybody, but people are more interested because we're getting conditioned to it now because they see people getting on the news. People are more interested. A lot of people are more interested in viral fame than they are in helping people. And it's like, again, if you're going to pull out your phone, call the police first. Like I see so many recordings where people are recording something violent happening. They're like, well, maybe we should call the police now. I'm like, no shit, you should call the police. You should have called the police before you started filming this. So I think that, again, society has just, we're going down a really dark road of where we've just lost empathy for each other. And I think it's grown more. It's grown more over the last 4 years, for sure. The divisiveness and the cameras recording stuff, and people not wanting to listen to people, or people not wanting to have people near them that don't think like them. And we can't live in a world like that. There's only so much space on this planet, and we're one country, and it's like we can't start segregating people who don't think or look or act like us. Like that's not how the world works. So yes, something as simple, a simple act of kindness can go a long way. And then yes, if you see something weird and you call the police, then you can be a hero without putting your life in danger. So it was something I definitely wanted to speak to with the movie, because it's just, people are like, oh, this is so timely. I'm like, what? I wrote this a while ago. It took a long time to get this movie made. So it's sadly always been timely, but hopefully it won't be more timely. Hopefully in 5 years, it'll be like, oh, that's a thing of the past. What a relic of the past.
Yeah. You and I are basically the same age. I mean, we're born just a few months apart. And I remember a time when we were trying to really go MLK, like judge a person on their character, and not on how they look. And when I saw Jojo Rabbit, I saw an indictment of both political sides, where everybody's trying to identify somebody else before the person even gets to be anything. You're this, you're that. I've been called every name in the book. I have the ability to make both sides mad at me, so I guess I kind of pride myself in. But when I saw Jojo Rabbit, and I'm like, yeah, this stuff that you guys are using Jewish, caricatures from the Nazi point of view, everybody is doing this to everybody. We got to stop this assassination of each other's, like not even having a chance to be a good person. Like you can literally disagree, and both of you can be fantastic, wonderful people that want roughly the same outcome as you just disagree on the means. I mean, if we can't get along with that, jinkies.
Well, I do blame a lot of our leaders for that, and I think the two-party system has a lot to do with that, because they only stay in power if they have an enemy, and that's both political parties that do that. Neither one can claim that they're better than the other one, neither one can take the moral or religious high road and say, well, we're better than the other side, because that's how they stay in power. I think, they realize like if there was ever a true rise of like an independent, like People's Party, then their power's over. Like all those lobbyists and all that shit, all that stuff is for naught. So that's why it's gonna take a general population kind of realizing that they're being played to hate other people, and see through the tactics, which are for me clearly obvious. Like I'm sitting here just going, every time I see certain politicians of either party speak, I'm like, all you're doing is just playing into the stereotype, and all you're doing is like stirring up fear in your people and disdain for other people. And there's a simple way that you can have a general conversation. Like I have like friends that are like ultra right-wing evangelicals. I have friends that are like ultra left-wing atheists, and we get on the phone and we have conversations, and they're like, well, I wish everybody would talk like you. And I said, but you need to talk to other people. You need to talk to other people like you're talking to me, and not just get whipped up when your leaders tell you, give you a talking point. Like once you start talking in talking points and you're not talking an actual discussion, then you're in trouble,
Yeah, I agree. The other thing is, if you're that whipped up in something, find something else to get whipped up about, go create something. So editorially, as you try to decide what you're doing, and I understand Hilliard's writing process. He's kind of like a conveyor belt. He's like, now I'm working on this. Now I'm working on that, and that he's just always.
I wish I was like that.
Yeah, right. And I saw one of the things you were talking about, kind of your pace. You're more, I guess you would say more artistic. Like this is when I can write. Now, if you have to work, you work, but when you're writing your own stuff editorially, though, how do you sort out like I need to write something, and fill this bucket and fill that bucket, and I want to go fill that bucket, but I'm not able to right now because I got to get. How do you sort all that stuff out when you're creative?
Honestly, it's usually with the work that's coming in and the deadlines that I have. Like I'm like. I had and I try not to do this often, but I had a script I was supposed to turn in today, and I called the showrunners and I was like, hey, how hard of a deadline is today? Or yesterday I called them and they're like, well, actually, if you got it to us Monday, that would help us because we've got a lot of stuff on our plate. So I'm like, yay. So that gives me a chance to, but a lot of my work is based just upon the work that I have now. Like, I mean, I am like Hilliard in that, I'm doing a lot of stuff at the same time because I'll be pitching for this project. I'm up for this project, so I have to have a pitch for that. I'm rewriting this. I'm working on this show. I still have my horror scripts, that haven't been picked up that I'm still trying to hustle. So I'm doing a lot at the same time, but I focus my writing on what's in front of me. Like, cause like right now it's like, I've had this major like debate the last couple of years, like what new thing do I want to write? Cause I have so much work stuff set up that at some point I want to write a new script, and, and I've kind of settled on the fact that I want to write a gay horror movie. Like it's just, there hasn't been one. I shouldn't say there hasn't been one. There have been some, but I want to write one. And at first I put the pressure on myself that it has to be some kind of high brow take, like Get Out, on the gay experience. But one of my friends was like, dude, just write it. Because I was like, I got to come up with something highbrow. I don't just want to write a bunch of, gay and lesbian, like, trans like camp counselors getting killed by a mass killer. He's like, just write that. We'll take anything. Like we don't have representation in the genre. Like just write anything. So, yeah. But I'm going to approach that once I get into it by making it, I want to make it fun. Like, I want to have fun writing it. So, but it's like, when am I going to get the time to do that?
Yeah, right. And then that's why I'm asking this question of you, because you've got to pay the bills.
Yeah.
You've got to flex your artistic muscle. I guess with this movie, you would have to at least think through like your social responsibility. I mean, do you just make graduation day with an all gay cast, or is it, do you have to bring in some kind of message, or I don't, I mean, I'm not telling you what you have to.
Yeah. I mean, I did a message movie, I feel like, with Good Samaritan, or Don't Look Back. Good Samaritan was the original title. I feel like I already did my message. And I think message movies can be important. It's funny when you mentioned MLK before, because I always say, like, you need your Martin Luther Kings, but you also need your Malcolm X's. And I think in movies, having stories that speak specifically to the experience of the audience that you're writing for is important. I also think representation is just as important, because usually we're all telling human stories anyway. Like, so if, like with Don't Look Back, I mean, we have a beautiful, great Black lead in the movie, and that automatically is saying something, because you don't see, Black female leads in a lot of genre films. And that gives it a different angle, perhaps, when audiences are viewing the story. They can add some extra context onto that. But sometimes just having, there's a slasher movie that I wrote that's very Scream-like. I think, I don't know if we talked about it on the last show or not, but the way I describe it is, it's like, it's a great slasher movie, but instead of focusing on all the pretty white college students and their one Black and brown friend, we just move the camera over to all the pretty Black and brown students and their one or two white friends. So I think sometimes representation is just as important as having a message. And I think representation in and of itself is a message, because especially if the movie's successful, you're just letting Hollywood know, hey, these people, because the thing is, like, it's great to go see a movie where somebody looks like you. Like, that's the thing, with Hollywood, is when I'm explaining diversity in casting, which honestly was not a thing until recently. The whole conversation is really that the default for casting directors is white when they're casting lead roles. That's just automatically what they send you, is all white people. So it's nothing to do with, like, we found the best person for the job. It's like, well, but you only looked at one pool of talent. Like, even when we've sent out casting director notices saying open to all ethnicities, 99% of the submissions we get are white actresses and actors. So then we have to go out and say, looking for Latino, looking for Asian, looking for Black. We have to specifically, looking for Muslim. We have to specifically say we're looking for before that, and then they'll still throw white actors in there too. Well, are you sure you don't want to look at this person? So that's kind of the battle that actors and actresses of color are facing in Hollywood. Is just, they're not thought of as lead, unless you're Halle Berry or Denzel Washington, or Will Smith. You're not thought of as a lead actor or lead character in a movie. So, hopefully that changes.
It does seem like we're getting better at this, though.
Yeah,
and by that I mean we're making a terrible mess of it. Like when you see, I don't know, just like when the reward shows are trying to correct, they're going to overcorrect, and you're like, come on, like, let's find the best movie. Like, I saw Parasite and I thought, it's okay. I'm not sure why it won. And if it's going to be a social kind of thing, great. Okay. Let's sort it out. But at some point we have to correct this. And like, my daughter and I like to play a game, like recast the movie, with modern characters and everything. And I know that I have, just because culturally I'm a white dude. And so I cast with the white people in my mind. And then so we'll kind of go through an initial push, get everybody casted. And then I'm like, okay, now let's get uncomfortable and let's find a character who's whatever, transgendered or gay or whatever it is. Let's completely flip this relationship by making this other character something else. but it's a lens I have to put in front of how I initially think of it, which is,
Right.
I think, how it works with humans and race and bigotry. It's like, yeah, of course, we're all bigots, but it's that slowing down and saying, now, how do I make this more, inclusive without
Yeah.
making it hokey inclusive,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Is like, pendulums tend to swing hard in society.
Right.
Especially when they're course correcting it. It's happened with, women's rights and civil rights. Like there's usually a hard shift of the pendulum, and then there's always a backlash, and then you end up somewhere in the middle of stuff.
Right.
So, there's been a hard shift in a good way, I feel, but it's because I'm always coming from a place of like educating or bringing people together for the long term. And I know a lot of people that, like I think, this course correction has made certainly straight white men feel uncomfortable in the business. Like I hear them complaining all the time, like, oh, now I can't get work. And it's like, well, now you know how I felt for 20, 25, 30 years, but this is only going to last for a short time.
Right.
But it's not true. They obviously can still get work. It's just like when you're used to kind of being like people's first choice, like you said, when you have that lens on, when you're used to being the first person called in for a leading role, and now all of a sudden they're bringing people that normally are overlooked, you're going to feel like it's a slight against you, but it's not a slight against you. It's just like a correction that the business is making. So, they're settling into it, but it's funny. Even after Black Panther came out, I'm like, that is the blackest movie I've ever seen in my life. Like from like the soundtrack to the accents to the locations to the costumes. And that movie blew away most of Marvel's superhero movies. And when you point that out and say, see, people don't care. Like if you make a good movie, that speaks to people. They don't care if people have costumes that they're not accustomed to or speaking in a dialect they're not. Like they don't care. They want good movies. And then people will go, yeah, but that was a Marvel movie, so that's different. Like you still hear that in Hollywood. And it gets so frustrating. And it's like, get out,
Yeah.
Well, there were still mostly white people in that movie. It's like, okay, fine. It's like,
my complaint about that movie, because I didn't really land for me. It was good. But I wasn't blown away by it. But it was early on, and it was just a simple thing. I grew up in the Bay. I've been to Oakland. I've played basketball there. And when they showed those kids playing basketball, that wasn't Oakland. Like they concocted some kind of New York version of Oakland. You know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't like that is not what Oakland looks like. And so if you're from that area, you're like that your show. They did is they showed us New York and said it was Oakland.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's so simple to get that right. How in the world do they miss that? Here is this legit movie that's going to make a lot of money and no one cares about this detail, but it's such a simple thing to get right.
Well, it's probably, I can't speak for that, but it's probably because you see that in a lot of movies where it's like, like people from Louisiana know that we shot our movie in Louisiana. Right. I never say where it takes place on purpose because I'm like, I'm not going to try to pretend it's some other city. But yeah, when they're working on big budget things like that, it's like, well, we'll just, they look at pictures and then they just try to recreate something, wherever they're shooting. Cause they're like, well, we can't afford to fly a crew and cast down to Oakland just to shoot, these kids in this one scene.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the movie did great. They didn't need my help or my approval or anything. So they did just fine. But it is funny how those little things can nest in there. And you're just like, I couldn't let it go. And I'm like, let's let it go, Pete. But I couldn't. I was so aggravated by
you're
that.
Like, you don't understand.
Yeah. They don't understand Oakland.
Yeah.
My mom drove by a Black Panther protest once. So I don't want to take too much of your time, but seriously, man, we shouldn't take years in between doing these things. Anytime you're working on something, and I can look in your IMDb, you're working on stuff. Do you want to talk about any of your upcoming projects at all, or is it all sort of pre-talk about?
No, there's a couple of things I can talk about. I mean, obviously, Don't Look Back is out now on iTunes and Amazon and Vudu and all the streaming services. So, definitely if you get a chance, I'd love people to check that out. I also produced a movie called The Call that Timothy Woodard Jr., who directed The Final Wish, a couple years ago, directed. It has a Lynn Shay in it. Again, we reteamed with Lynn Shay, but we also paired her with Tobin Bell, which is super exciting. It's their first movie together. And that came out in theaters and is now on VOD too. So, and it did really well in theaters, like, especially because of the COVID, thing. It was like in the top 5 for a long time at the theaters.
Yeah.
And it's a really fun, like, if you want a straight up horror movie, like the Call is your straight up horror movie. And then your Don't Look Back is the kind of mystery thriller that you can watch with your friends who are normally too scared to watch a horror movie or don't like horror movies. They can watch that one, but it's a good double bill. I'm working on 2 animated YA series for Netflix, which is fun. One they've announced, so I can talk about it, but it's a spinoff of the Usagi Yojimbo Japanese comic book. Right. And it's been so much fun writing in that world. It's just been a lot of fun. We still get to kill people, but it's only in silhouette and you can't kill them much. You can't show much. It can't be a lot of killing, only a little bit. And then, the other things that I have going on are potentially going on. We're just waiting for deals to happen and things. So as always, I just tell people to follow me on Twitter. I just tell them to follow me on Twitter because I always make announcements, about what I have going on Twitter.
Right. Right. What's your Twitter handle?
Oh, Jeffrey A. Reddick, Jeffrey A. Reddick. Oh, you know how to spell my name.
Apparently, I have to always make sure I get it right.
Yeah, but that's the best way to kind of keep up with me. I don't post that much on Instagram because, I'm just writing all the time. So it's like, that's not too exciting. I'm going to probably post more cat pictures on there. And, and maybe if this working out a little bit in keto diet pays off, maybe I'll post a shirtless picture someday. We'll see. Nice. But that's what you have to post on Instagram. That's all they care about is get that shirt off. So Twitter is the best way to stay up with what I'm doing. And, but yeah, I am really proud of Don't Look Back. And again, we've gotten some, really positive responses. So, I hope people will check that out. And if they like it, kind of spread the word because it's a special film for me. It's, my first one, so it's not perfect, but it's real. I'm proud of it. I'm really proud of it.
I've decided that I'm not going to complain about lower budget movies. I guess I don't know what the nice term is because there's nothing wrong with making a movie for any amount of money.
Movies.
You said?
No, indie movies.
Oh, indie. Okay. How about that? Yeah. Okay. So I am not going to be as critical of indie movies because you guys are doing incredible things, and I can't complain about the this shot or that shot thing if I want to still complain about all the ridiculous superhero movies and see forever just so many spin-offs and everything else. Like I want the original ideas. That's the indie market. And I've become really comfortable with how the movies look, and I think it's great. The other thing I want to say is you think about how many times, I'm talking mostly to the audience here, you might have gone to a theater in the past, maybe it's 5 times a year, once a month, twice, whatever it is. Do that with video on demand. Just have a night with your friends, throw a projection on the wall or whatever it is, make some cookies, invite some people over, spend $5. And then just put some money back in pockets for people like Jeffrey to make wonderful things because here he is writing his heart out and working hard to bring us things, whether it's Don't Look Back or, whatever, the next Final Destination. Spend some money on these movies because these indie folks, there are some wonderful stories. And it's not just, I've had a bunch of international films come on, but these aren't foreign films from the olden days where you're like, what in the hell did I just watch? These are just straight up good stories, and I love it, man. I love being able to explore this universe with people like you and pick your brain. I think the world of you, and thank you so much for coming on, Jeffrey.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And yeah, let's not make this a couple of year thing. What episode am I now? 800?
800 and something. I've got to look. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot of in between episodes. So we got to fix that.
Yeah. Eddie, you have too many projects. We got to talk about them. All right. Stand by. I'm going to sign off here. Hold on.
Okay.